Making mistakes is part of being human. We all make them from time to time, and hopefully each mistake is a learning opportunity. We look at what happened and try to understand why it did to avoid it in the future. Think of a toddler learning the stove is hot. They touch it once and it burns them. They quickly learn that touching the stove hurts, so they stop doing it. It's important that we're able to learn from our mistakes, or else we'll constantly be burning ourselves. That's the purpose of a post-mortem report. We create a post-mortem after an incident, an outage, or some event when something goes wrong, or at the end of a project to analyze how it went. This report documents in detail what exactly happened leading up to, during, and after the event or project. It tries to highlight things that went well and things that didn't. The purpose of a post-mortem is to learn something from an event or project, not to punish anyone or highlight mistakes. Sure, there'll likely be some mistakes that'll be addressed, but the intention isn't to punish or shame. It's meant to understand the root cause of why the mistakes happen and how to prevent them from happening again. The post-mortem process isn't quite over yet. Once the report is written up, it needs to be communicated. These types of reports have value beyond the immediate people involved in the incident, investigation, and writing of the report. Sharing post-mortems with other teams at an organization helps encourage a culture of learning from mistakes. It shows that your team is willing to acknowledge when you mess up, but you don't let mistakes hold you back. It sets a good example for others to follow, and the content in the report might trigger a thought for some other team and make them realize they have a similar problem in their infrastructure. You may also identify areas that could be improved that are the responsibility of teams that weren't involved in the incident. When it comes to postmortems, sharing is caring. If you embrace postmortems, they tend to foster a culture where it's okay to make mistakes. This is a healthy attitude to have in any organization. If people are afraid to make mistakes, then decision-making will be very conservative. It's hard to push the boundaries and try new things if everyone is afraid of screwing up. But if the prevailing culture says that mistakes are okay as long as we can learn from them, then you'll have an organization that's willing to take risks and try out new and exciting ideas. Now that we know the benefits of a post-mortem, let's take a closer look at what goes into one. A typical post-mortem for an incident begins with a brief summary, just a short paragraph that summarizes the incident. It should include what the incident was, how long it lasted, and what the impact was, and how it was fixed. Be mindful of time zone when listing times and dates in the post-mortem. Always clearly state the time zone to be absolutely clear. Next, you need a detailed timeline of key events. This should include everything that happened throughout the event, like when it started, and when people involved were notified or realized what was going on. Every action taken in an attempt to resolve this situation should also be identified. These could contain times and dates along with time zones and who did what. The timeline should wrap up with the actions taken that resolved the outage and restored services, signaling the end of the event. Next, a very detailed and honest account of the root cause is covered. This should go into detail explaining what led to the issue. It could be something like a configuration change that was pushed live without proper testing, or a command that was typoed. Remember that the intent isn't to blame or shame. It's to be honest with what went wrong so that a lesson can be learned from it. If the cause stemmed from a lack of testing, this might indicate areas for improvement in test verification. If it was from a typoed command, this may reveal the need to automate a manual process. A more detailed explanation of the resolution and recovery efforts should be documented next. This is similar to the timeline covered earlier and should include the dates, times, and time zones. But it should go into more detail about what steps were taken to recover, the rationale, and the reasoning behind those actions, and what the outcome of each step was. Including the rationale gives those reading the report more context on how the event played out. Lastly, close out the report with a list of specific actions that should be taken to avoid the same scenario from happening again. This should include any actions or efforts aimed at improving the response handling too. Steps to reduce response time or enhancements to monitoring would help. When you spin up a list of things to improve, look out for things like improvements to monitoring systems. Maybe the incident investigation revealed a gap in visibility into critical systems, or in the course of investigating, it turns out that an automation system isn't functioning as intended. While it's outside the scope of a post-mortem report to come up with solutions to these gaps, they should be listed in areas for improvement. Based on these discoveries, new projects can start to address the deficiencies found. One thing that often gets overlooked in post-mortem is what went well. But this is just as important as analyzing what went wrong. During the post-incident analysis, it's also good to highlight things that went well. These include fail-safe or failover systems that worked as designed and prevented a large outage or minimized the severity of the outage. This helps to demonstrate the effectiveness of our systems in place. For some folks, like those in finance, this is good news. It justifies any cost associated with these systems by clearly demonstrating a tangible benefit. This is important for any preventative system since they are frequently viewed as unnecessary costs by those that may not fully understand their benefit. These examples of systems working to prevent or reduce the impact of outages make that benefit very clear. Hopefully, you're better prepared now to learn from any mistake you might make in your career. And mistakes will be made because you're human, after all. Own them, learn from them, and do better next time. Such is true in IT, work, and in life. That brings us to the close of our sysadmin course. We hope you have a better understanding of the responsibilities of a sysadmin and how closely they relate to the work of an IT support specialist. Feel free to review any sections that might have been a bit heavy on the technical side. First up, we've got a quiz for you that will touch on everything we've learned in this module. Then, when you're ready, you can jump into the course project to put your new knowledge to work. We have some fictional companies that you're going to play system administrator for. You will need to take a look at their current infrastructure and make recommendations for improvements. I wish you the best of luck.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Candace.
Congrats on making it through this course. Now that you've made it this far, we're here to give you a sneak peek into what an interview on the technical subjects covered by this course might look like.
We hope this will help you have a better idea of what to expect in your next interview. Just remember to keep learning and keep practicing.
So in this scenario, let's say I come to you and ask you to help me deploy some applications to my Windows users. In total, we have about 100 machines that we want to install to. Half are going to get one application and the other half is going to get another. What are some ways that we can accomplish this?
First, I would like to know if these machines are managed by Active Directory.
Yeah, let's say that we have one Active Directory domain. And before we go into deploying the software, tell me a little bit about what Active Directory is and why it's helpful in this kind of environment.
Active Directory organizes users, groups, and computer permissions to restrict certain resources in the enterprise environment. It's also used to deploy software, and it's also used to control the environment.
Okay, so we already have Active Directory set up. How can we utilize it to deploy our software?
Since we're deploying this file to a lot of users, we want to test it out first. So I want to know if this is an MSI file.
Yeah, it is an MSI file, and yes, I agree, we should test it out. So talk to me about how you do your testing.
Okay, so we want to replicate the application for both sets of users. Do you know if these users are in different OUs?
Yeah, let's say that we have a sales and engineering OU, and we want to target each with their own application.
So we want to create test accounts and then add those test accounts to those specific OUs, or we can have pilot users. Another way to fully test this process is by creating a group for the pilot users, and then we can create a new group policy that will allow the application to be installed once the computer boots up.
Okay, and where would we store the MSI file?
We could store the file on a shared network drive if we have one, and if we don't, we can always create one.
Okay, great. So let's say that we do all this, and now our packages have both been tested. We know they're working well. Now what?
So we want to send out communications to the target users, and then we also want to do this during off hours so it would not be disruptive. And then we also want to give the users our support contact, just so if something does arise, they'll be able to contact someone and get help immediately.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good plan. In this scenario, we saw some of the interviewing skills that we've called out before, like asking follow-up questions and defining terms when you mention them. We also saw how answering technical questions is not always about technical issues. We also need to take into account the human component, like putting a communications plan in place. That's it for now. See you again at the end of the next course.